Good day and welcome to another episode of What's Happening Today, presented to you by Rapido News Network. In our first story, we will talk about the Supreme Court giving states green light to ban abortions, overturning its own landmark Roe v. Wade ruling. Post that, we will discuss President Biden comments after the Supreme Court ruling in his bid to galvanize voters. After that, we will talk about the passage of the gun reforms bill that passed in Congress. And in our final story, we will talk about the Russian Ukrainian conflict. So let's get started. In our first story, the Supreme Court on Friday revoked the constitutional right to an abortion that has been in place for half a century, overturning Roe v. Wade, clearing the way for dozens of states to swiftly ban the procedure and throwing the country into uncharted political, legal, social, and medical territory. The bombshell decision is set to upend elections across the countries as governors, attorney generals, and other state and local leaders gain new powers to determine whether abortions will be permitted, if at all, and who should be prosecuted and potentially incarcerated when bans take effect. The High Court's vote to overturn nearly 5 decades of court ruling, upholding a right to end a pregnancy, won the support of 5 of the court's 6 conservative justices, while Chief Justice John Roberts and the court's 3 liberal justices opposed overruling Roe. By the way, we have a very informational video about the history of abortion in the United States. I recommend that you watch that video after watching this video to know about this subject. We will put the link to that video in the description below. Now, in our next story, calling the Supreme Court's reversal of Roe v. Wade a tragic error, President Biden on Friday tried to galvanize voters ahead of the midterm election and called on Americans to make their voices heard. Speaking from the White House, Mr. Biden said that the Justice Department would defend any woman who travels to a different state to have an abortion, and said the Department of Health and Human Services would make sure that abortion medications were available to all. But to truly protect the constitutional right that is so fundamental, Mr. Biden said, voters must elect candidates who will codify Roe v. Wade into the federal law. This decision must not be the final word, Mr. Biden said. He further added that my administration will use all of its appropriate lawful powers. Congress must act and you must vote. You can have the final word. This is not over. The president's speech, which came just hours after the Supreme Court overturned the nearly 50-year-old decision, signaled that Mr. Biden's party will likely make abortion a central issue in the midterms in an attempt to energize voters at a time when Democrats are expected to face losses. Now, in our next story, scrambling to respond to a recent spate of bloody gun massacres, US lawmakers passed the most significant federal gun restrictions in decades on Friday, following years of false starts and failures to tighten gun laws. Following Senate passage late Thursday, the House passed a bipartisan bill that takes steps to restrict gun access for the youngest buyers, domestic violence offenders, and others who could pose a risk to their communities. The bipartisan Safer Communities Act also would fund school safety and mental health programs. The House approved the bill by 234 to 193 margin as 14 Republicans joined all Democrats. The legislation heads to President Joe Biden, who is expected to quickly sign it into law. Democrats hoped the legislation would further rein in gun violence after lone gunmen massacred black shoppers at Buffalo grocery stores and children at a Texas elementary school last month. The victory for gun safety advocates this week also comes with a setback, as the Supreme Court struck down a New York law that restricted the ability to carry a concealed weapon. Democrats nonetheless cheered the legislation's passage as a landmark event after they won support from Republicans, including Senate Minority Leader Mr. Mitch McConnell, the Kentucky Republican who has long fought efforts to restrict gun ownership after previous mass shooting that rocked the country. Tonight, after 28 years of inaction, bipartisan members of Congress came together to heed the call of families across the country and pass legislation to address the gun violence in our communities, Biden said in a statement Thursday night after the Senate approved the bill. President further added, families in Uvalde and Buffalo and too many tragic shootings before have demanded actions, and tonight we acted. Now, in our final story on Russian Ukrainian conflict, 4 months into the war in Ukraine, the countries aligned against Russia face growing economic pain even as sanctions and energy embargoes are showing little impact on Russian President Vladimir Putin's military campaign or his political standing at home. US officials vowed that Russia's financial system would be battered if it attacked Ukraine, and President Biden boasted in March that sanctions were crushing the Russian economy and that the ruble is reduced to rubble. But Russian oil revenues have set records as crude price surged, and after plunging in February, the ruble hit a 7-year high against the dollar this week. Biden officials said the Russia economy is nevertheless incurring damages that will compound over time, especially as restrictions on technology exports to Russia gradually stunt the growth of its industries from aerospace to computing. And on Thursday, a White House spokesman said that the leader of Group of Seven Industrial Nation or G7 nation set to begin meetings in Madrid on Sunday will discuss new plans to further tighten the screws on Russia's economy. But it is unclear which side has more time to spare. The Ukrainian government says that as many as 200 of its soldiers are being killed daily and thousands of civilians have died as Russia seized territory in eastern Ukraine. Mr. Putin continues to enjoy near dictatorial power and he is unlikely to enter serious talks with Ukraine while his military makes gains. Russia's financial system is back to business as usual after a few weeks of severe bank runs. Elena Rybakova, deputy chief economist at the Institution of International Finance, wrote on Twitter last week, adding that those who thought that cutting Russia from finance for a few weeks at the beginning of the war would stop the war have proven naive. Now that was all for the major news update for June 25th. Stay tuned for our next update on the ongoing world affairs. We hope that you find this video useful. If you like this video, hit like. And for a continued update on what's happening around the world, consider subscribing. To get notified whenever we post something new, hit that bell icon. If you have any comments or any suggestions for us, please let us know in the comment sections below. Thank you.